in June. The backdrop to the work of the Forward Planning Committee, who are really charged with thinking about where we're going long term in the church, is really set out in the paper that you have. Dropping numbers and an older age profile within churches is one of the things I consistently meet as I visit congregations. The drop in number of ministers of word and sacrament, a projected drop of 25% within the next 10 years, and probably, unless things change, a similar drop in the 10 years that follow that, and so potentially a drop to half the number of ministers that we currently have. Some congregations struggling to find office bearers to fill key positions. Some congregations paying others to do the treasurer's job because they can't find anyone within their number to be a treasurer any longer. Perhaps a decreasing income in terms of money that's emerging. Certainly that's true of some congregations at the moment. We are not sure how widespread that is, but certainly it's something that seems to be emerging. Alongside that, though, is not all a dull, dark picture. And amongst that, there are a few congregations who are experiencing a measure of numerical growth, who are seeing more people around on a Sunday morning and midweek than they were in previous years. There are also a number of what might be termed fresh expressions of church beginning in various places across the Presbytery. They are, all of them, I would say, at very early days. But in speaking to John Drain, who knows more about fresh expressions than any of us, John would say he's not aware of any place in Scotland that genuinely has a fresh expression in place. They are all at the beginning and all beginning to develop. But in our presbytery, there are a good number of those. So it's not all a picture of doom and gloom. There are positive things that are going on and that we need to be aware of. I've also been involved, as you know, with the panel on review and reform, and because of that perhaps have a national perspective on how things are going. And one of the things that folk were very clear about when we spoke to them in November and December was that developing outreach and mission are seen by very many folk in the church as being absolutely crucial. We recently put a video online and had a survey attached to that. Over 300 folk have responded to that. And when they were asked about whether it was simply about maintaining what's on the go at the moment, or whether we need to adapt what we do, or whether we need a balance between the new and the old, the vast majority of people were saying to us, we need to maintain a balance between maintaining what we've got on the ground and developing new initiatives. Almost 70% said that. There were only 3 people out of over 300 who said, actually, no, we need to commit our resources simply to keeping going what we've got going. But actually, there's that sense that we need to move forward. There was an other that was there, and there were lots of comments that were made by folk. Someone said, we change how we teach we should not change, we change how we teach the gospel and reach the people, but we do not change what God has said. One other comment said, it's not a question of new or old initiatives, but on focusing on what works in different places towards mission and growth and faith. Someone else, though, said we need a radical slash and burn approach, no longer being held back by sentimentality. Somebody else said, actually, not missional, there's no evidence that works. We need to focus on discipleship. That seems to work better for church growth, give people purpose, responsibility, actions, rather than keeping the numbers up. Focus on people rather than numbers. So lots of comments that have been around. One comment that particularly struck me was from a minister, and it simply said this: I agree that our focus needs to shift to the world outside the walls of the church, but not just to ensure our own survival, to draw others in. And same problem again, who is to be doing all this innovative stuff? And that's the pressure that's around. Am I to refuse to conduct funerals, visit schools, take Sunday services, talk to the guild, visit hospitals in order to start new initiatives which the church members who pay my stipend are not interested in? Now there's the real tension that's around for us in the church, and that someone has helpfully filled in. If you've not already filled in the survey, I'll give you details of how to get at the end of the meeting. There was also recognised by people within the national context a need for others to take on roles or responsibilities currently carried by full-time ministers of Word and Sacrament. Folk were very clear that actually we can't expect a smaller number of ministers simply to carry on carrying what ministers have done before. Others need to carry some of those responsibilities. Asked about that question in the survey, and again, the numbers are quite stark and quite startling. The number of folk who are saying yes, heavily outweighing those who say no. There are less than 10% who are saying either no or don't know. The others were either saying yes or yes, but perhaps with reservations. The other thing was about building a church which includes younger generations, and that being seen as important. And probably in at least 70% of the local church reviews that I've carried out, that's been a concern of the congregations. How do we change the age profile of our church? When asked about that and whether that was something that we needed to address, again in the survey, the vast majority of folk are saying either yes or yes with reservations. And again, less than 10% of people are saying this is not an issue that we need to look at. It's an issue that's there and an issue that we need to address. During the national consultations, and folk at Dunglass may not be aware of this, but I shared with the wider church their mission statement. Their mission statement reads, a church where people of all generations grow in faith and share in active participation. Many folk through the consultation said, actually, my church could own that too. Actually, we're not as far apart as we think we are. And there sometimes are real tensions in the church over different things, but actually when we come to our core values and the things that we believe and what we're taking forward, I think there's a degree of agreement in that trumps almost everything else that's around. And that mission statement is one that many churches could own. What about us as a presbytery? I guess as a forward planning group, we have been looking at that, and we have a sense that actually it's about creating a vibrant Christian witness in every community across Presbytery. That perhaps could be the mission statement of the Presbytery of Lothian, and perhaps every presbytery in the Church of Scotland, to create a vibrant Christian witness in every community across Presbytery. But we have to be careful about how that is read and how it is heard. Because that is not necessarily to say that we need to have a Sunday morning service in every community, nor is it saying that we necessarily need to have a church building in every community. That's not what that's saying. Those two things are not absolutely necessary in order to have a vibrant Christian witness in every community. It may well be in most, but we need to look at the way that we do things as we move forward. We've also been looking at research and I guess other papers from other places, and particularly a report from the Church of England. And their research would suggest, it wouldn't prove, but their research would suggest that ministers have an absolutely crucial role in this. This is not about undermining or undervaluing in any way the role of ministers. It's not shrugging our shoulders and saying, okay, we're going to have less ministers, so what, we don't need ministers anyway. That's not the case. Ministers have a crucial role to play in the church. They have had in the past, and we recognise that that's going to be true going forward. One of the other things that came out of the Church of England research that they did was that where there's not a minister, a key local leader is needed. Someone who actually is the person who is heading things up. And that actually is really important, and is one of the things that they saw in the churches that were growing. But also that spreading ministers too thinly is counterproductive. Giving ministers more and more to do actually decreases what they're able to accomplish in terms of taking kingdom work forward. Now, there is some question that's been asked over the depth of the research that's been done, and by those who do statistics, about whether the statistical evidence is strong enough, but actually it seems to point in that direction. Someone else said to me, well, actually, when we were working on the statistics about smoking a long time ago, folk kept coming back saying, well, the statistics don't quite prove, because there's lots of different factors involved, and there are lots of different factors involved. But many of the figures that they came up with from the research would certainly point that way. Spreading ministers too thinly is counterproductive. They looked at churches of different sizes. I could have chosen any of the graphs, but for a church that on average is 50 to 99 people on a Sunday, the adult average weekly attendance, that's what the AWA stands for, average weekly attendance. The column on the left-hand side is for when a minister has one church, and then increasing as it goes along the line, and that is the decline experienced by those churches. So the decline experienced by churches where the ministers have multiple kind of linkages, the decline has been far starker than in congregations where there is a minister and a church. Now, that may not surprise you. When I mentioned this to folk at St Clement's and St Ninians some time ago, they said to me, it's not rocket science, why did you not know that before now? And it may well be that you think exactly that. In June last year, we suggested that there were choices that faced us and that we had to begin to look at those. And so in June last year, we asked the question, which of these do we choose? Do we either go for effecting lots of unions to match the number of ministers, or do we develop a pattern where some churches thrive without the minister? And I would say thrive rather than survive without the minister. That would mean developing other models and ways of doing things, but is that not possible? I guess as a forward planning committee, we would be saying, actually we think we should be going for the second and not the first. And so in the report this evening, you'll see that what we are suggesting as a framework for the way forward is that we should be suggesting that there should be no major programme of unions or links. That's been what we pursued in the past. We think we should actually pursue something different going forward. So no major programme of unions or links. That does not rule out doing unions and links, but actually we would want that to be driven by people on the ground, by congregations who actually feel they're going the same way, who say, actually, it would be beneficial for us to unite or to share together. And in those circumstances, that would be the right thing to pursue. But to be uniting congregations who are very different and who do not want to join together, in our estimation, is not the way that we should go. That would mean that some parishes would function without a minister of word and sacrament, and that has implications for us about how we do things, how we train people, and the structures that we put in place. And I guess the one that would be most controversial would be saying that actually there may come a time when a church is not sustainable. And in the past, what we've sought to do is to unite them or to link them with a neighbouring parish. We've discussed this a number of times on the forward planning group, and our feeling has actually been that it may actually be beneficial to let those congregations go. And not somehow to take what is there and to bring it in somewhere else, and to then spend 2 or 3 years trying to manage what could effectively be a very difficult union, which would take the energies away from the work of the church. But it may actually be better to say to people in a congregation that is no longer sustainable, we do want you to continue to worship, but we want you to choose where to be involved. Choose which church is appropriate for you, the place where you want to worship, the place where you want to be involved, and go and do that. Now, we'll have an opportunity, you'll have an opportunity to discuss that with your sessions, and then as we come back in June, as I say, that's probably the most controversial part of what's there in what we're saying. In terms of allocation of ministers, we would be saying the population of a parish should not be the only factor to take into consideration, but the ability of a congregation to pay for a minister should not be the only factor either. So we don't simply go to a place where if you can afford a minister, you can have one. If you can't afford a minister, you don't get one. But actually, we've been here before. I convened the planning committee previously, and we tried to say to people, how do we weigh everything up? And actually, there were so many different views that we weren't able to come up with something. And so, having done that last time, I suspect that the answer would be roughly the same again, that different folk will weigh things in different ways. And the consequence of that will be that I suspect that we will not find a formula that will tell us how we allocate ministers. Now, as a mathematician, That really galls me to say that, because I'd much rather have a nice, clean formula that says, here's how we're going to do it. But Folks Church isn't like that. So we're not going to, I suspect, have a nice, clean formula. There will be lots of different things that we'll need taken account of as we make decisions about how ministers are allocated. Alongside that, other forms of local leadership should be developed, including but not exclusively further use of ordained local ministers. We are going to need people to provide leadership within local congregations, and that is going to be crucial going forward. We also recognise that congregations engaging in active outreach and mission should be given incentives and support in developing this, that we should not simply be a hands-off saying, it doesn't matter what you do, we don't care, but actually that as a presbytery, we need to be encouraging, incentivising and supporting congregations who are willing to step out and to try new things and to develop missional work. And so we'd be saying that perhaps should be a central part of our planning process. We also need to allow for and encourage development of new models of church, with ongoing support provided for those kinds of ventures. The report from the Church of England highlights the number of fresh expressions in the Church of England and tens of thousands of people who are at church each week in a fresh expression. And much of the growth in different places in the Church of England has come from fresh expressions. And so we need to be looking at that area as well. Not exclusively, it is about that balance between maintaining the old and developing the new, but within what we do and the way that we develop things, the Forward Planning Group believes that that's important. As I say, full discussion of this at Presbytery meeting in June. I've no doubt that many of you are itching at the moment either to agree or to disagree vehemently with some of the things that I've said. I hope you can hold your